Hey everyone, it's Oliver. Today we're talking about the pros and cons of being employed versus self-employment. This is something I like to think I have some experience talking about. After having attempted to operate a few businesses over the course of my education, while also working some good jobs and not so good jobs, I have learned a few things that might be interesting. What are the pros and cons to each way of doing things, and what are some of the things that you should think about before getting into one or the other? So let's start with employment and the pros of being an employee. The nice thing is that most of the time, someone, your boss, is telling you what to do. Depending on the job, you can somewhat turn off your brain when it comes to deciding what your day-to-day will look like. When I've done self-employed work, it becomes much more challenging to know what you need to prioritize. Do you focus on marketing? Do you focus on system building? Do you try to schmooze your clients to make sure that you have more clients going forward? The answer to all of those questions is yes, yes, and yes, and every day. You need to juggle many priorities with self-employment that compete for your time and energy. And when you're employed, hopefully you have a team of people to work with and you can kind of do your own thing while letting somebody else handle the other parts. You don't have to be the marketing department, the sales department, the technology department, and the administrative department all in one. Meanwhile, being self-employed inherently means that you are working solo, at least in the beginning. So you don't really have other people to lean on to take things off of your shoulders. Now, a lot of people can see this as a negative. Some see it as a positive, as a way to learn all the different aspects of a business, which is true. And other people see it as a negative and they just want someone to basically tell them what to do every day. And that's also fair. So let's talk about entrepreneurship and why there is some ugly truths that honestly a lot of people don't do a very good job of selling. So I'm going to sell some of the bad sides. When you're self-employed, it can often be lonely work and it can be very demotivating. You need to build up a team of people or business associates who are doing or trying to do a similar thing to you. That way you have somebody to talk to about it. It doesn't feel as much like you're just doing this thing by yourself. It's important to have people you can consult with, bounce ideas off of. And oftentimes that person will not be your group of friends who are working a regular job and who aren't really concerned with what's going on in a business. This doesn't mean you should stop hanging out with your regular friends. In fact, you'll probably need them more than ever. It just means that you need to make sure that you're also building up a network of like-minded people who can better relate to the struggles that you will inevitably go through when you're trying to launch a business. So let's call that another pro for being an employee. Often the company is looking for a specific culture, and if you fit into their culture, you can also make some great friends at work. At the very least, you'll probably be on okay terms with the people you work with, and you might even have people who are doing a very similar job to you, so you can bounce ideas directly off of them and work together on things. Forced friends, as I like to call it. Obviously, if you don't like the people you work with, it can suck just as much as having nobody to work with. But at least in theory, there is an option to find a new place of work. Regardless of whichever path you choose, I've learned it's extremely difficult to go anywhere if you don't build relationships or work on your ability to build relationships. In our current social media isolation era, it's easy to think everything is online. All the answers to my questions are online. Why do I need to talk to anybody else? But the person-to-person component, I feel like this is really obvious to a lot of people, but I feel like this needs to be said to the younger generation. Person-to-person stuff is still extremely important and is honestly one of the most important factors in having both a successful business, a successful career, and a successful personal life. Another con of business ownership is that income potential is only potential. You will frequently see online that the way entrepreneurship or self-employment is sold nowadays is that it has higher income potential. The important word in that phrase, as I've already mentioned 3 times now, is potential. There is always potential in whatever you do, but this seriously undersells the sacrifices that you have to make in order to reach that potential. The phrase entrepreneur comes from the phrase of someone who creates something new, someone who is good at organizing people, If someone is selling you on a form of self-employment that is cut and paste, you should probably run the other way, because every type of entrepreneurship is its own battle and everybody's path is a bit different and everybody's way of organizing people into an organization, hence the name, is going to be different. If you're thinking, oh, let me just start this particular business, cut and paste, do exactly what someone else is doing, that's called being a franchisee. That is basically frequently buying yourself another job. You can do that. There's nothing wrong with it. But if you want to create something completely new, completely your own, it's a little bit of a different battle. And I am all for learning how people have done things in the past, how people who have come before you have done things. But the most important thing in entrepreneurship is to be a constant experimenter and to be okay with constantly failing and trying something new until you find what works for you. There is so much free information, so much information in books that you can read for free. You really should not be spending, as I have learned through many errors, a significant amount of money when you're just trying to get your feet off of the ground. The best use of money is honestly just kind of trying short marketing experiments. Like anything, consistency is key. So you do sort of need to have a long timeline. As long as you're budgeting correctly for a marketing experiment, give it some time to see if it'll work. Keep revising, keep updating, find what works for you, and it's going to be different for everybody. But if you like an idea and you think it might work for you, then go for it, try it out. Another important point for business is that patience is extremely important. When you're trying something new, you have to accept the fact that it will take time to see the results of your experiments. You can't expect an instant sale after running your first Facebook ad or after knocking on your first door. It's a long, iterative slog a lot of the time. And a lot of entrepreneurship simply comes down to how many times you are willing to do the exact same thing over and over and over again. Rejection after rejection until you finally see some results. You have to be or become someone who does not give up easily. So I recently read a book called The $1 Million Weekend, or at least back in whenever I wrote this, which I think was July or August, by Noah Kagan. And in it, Noah relates the story of his father, who was a door-to-door salesperson, and his frame of mind when it came to getting rejected was to set a rejection goal every single day. Inevitably, within that rejection goal, you may get one or two people who are actually interested in talking to you, and one or two people who may actually be interested in what you're selling. If you make the goal the achievement doing the thing, the goal is to knock on 200 doors and get rejected 200 times, frames a negative thing in a positive way, because your goal is to just get out there and do the repetitions and pick up the weights, basically. So whatever the outcome is not necessarily within your control. Obviously, there is aspects of it that you can control, but the goal is to motivate yourself to keep doing it, to just keep going, keep going, keep going. So rather than seeing rejection as having failed, you're much more likely to get somewhere with your business if you see it as a success for the number of times that you went out and you got rejected. Obviously, you can use a different word, like whatever, rejected, denial, failure even. If the goal is to be a failure, then you're doing really good, right? So it's just reframing things that can be a very helpful frame of reference to work from. Contrast this to a job in which your goal is generally to create something or build something, and the only person likely to reject you is your boss or your manager. You're likely to face a lot less rejection day to day. Depends on the job, honestly. Like some jobs, especially sales jobs, your whole job is just like do this as many times as you can and try to sell as many times as you can. If you're somewhat more client facing, you will probably face rejection every day, but it's likely that your income won't completely depend on one single person. When you're self-employed and looking for work, it can be easy to feel like your income does rely on one single client, and this can put you in a mindset of scarcity and fear and doubt and all of those negative things. And I know I'm sounding like a preacher here about getting into a positive mindset, but while a little bit of fear might be good in getting you motivated in the morning, too much can be debilitating. So you have to find a nice balance. You have to find a way to have basically constant work to do. For example, like going out knocking on the doors or posting a million ads or whatever it is you're doing. You have to use that in order to continue to motivate yourself and worry a little bit less about the outcome. Obviously, the outcome is important and you can adjust your inputs based on the outcome. But when you're first getting started and you're not seeing much momentum, it's important to just get as many inbound potential leads, potential clients as possible. And the best way to do that is to just slap your name out there as much as humanly possible. Get your business out there, get flyers out there, knock on doors, talk to people, network, just do anything you can to make yourself known. So it is important to approach business with the mindset of working with multiple clients. Even before you start a business, trying to see if there might be potential clients who would want what you're selling is a great way to validate your business idea. Even better if you get a deposit for the thing that you're selling, service, whatever it is. Relationships sometimes go south. So if you have one client that's providing 80% of your income, it's pretty important that that relationship does not go south, and it's pretty important to diversify as well. Employees can be self-employed too. Another pro for being an employee is that frequently you can find a pathway to being self-employed. If you work in an industry long enough and become respected enough in the skills that you have and the things that you do, and you have people you know that would want to continue working with you specifically, then you have the foundation of a good business and you'd be doing what you're already doing, which would reduce the overall amount of skills and hurdles that you'd have to jump through with relation to entrepreneurship. And you may be able to avoid marketing altogether and simply operate off of referrals. From this point of view, being employed can be a very beneficial pathway to becoming self-employed, but you would have to work in an industry where your specific skills are important to the job and you have kind of a unique skill set that's not super easy to replicate by just anyone. So the more that something is regulated, the more difficult of an industry to break into, the more qualifications you need, the better, because it will make the work that you do and the skills that you have more valuable. And I kind of hate to say that because honestly, I'm not a huge fan of too much regulation and there being so many hurdles in the way to do something. And a lot of the time, like these hurdles are made up and you can kind of just jump through them. But for example, like being a doctor, those hurdles are real and you cannot practice healthcare without it, without having done the education. You know, once you've done the education, you've practiced, you have a reputation, you can start your own clinic, right? So that's a little more cut and dried. But for other things like software engineering, just go for it, man. Build something cool, see what happens. Final point here, no matter what you do, you cannot do it alone. There is no real right or wrong way to start a business, but there is a right or wrong mindset to operate from. Ultimately, at the end of the day, you are going to be working with other people, and people involve relationships. So if there is any one skill that you absolutely need to learn, it's how to be a relational person. Every other skill or talent you have is not useful if you cannot show it to anyone or sell it to anyone or prove to anyone that it's a valuable skill. This doesn't mean that you can't create a business from nothing. There are lots of software companies that pretty much exist exclusively in a website or app form. And some of the biggest companies in the world, just through word of mouth, became these giant marketplaces. But these companies are still relational companies because they are solving problems for people. Without the people, there would be no company. So it's fine to make software, to learn skills that you can sell, to do something similar to what somebody has done before. But at the end of the day, it will always come down to how you reach people, how you get them interested enough to pay for the thing that you're doing or the product that you're selling. That's about it. I'll leave the discussion here. I'm still learning and reading a lot about businesses and becoming a better communicator and building better relationships. But these are all kind of little important things in the grand scheme of life and in the grand scheme of business as well. Hope you found this interesting, and go check out the blog and the newsletter and the website, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.